A wife was always known for being loving and devoted to her husband, but lately, something had changed. Their relationship had been rocky for months, and while her husband tried to make things work, she found herself growing distant. One evening, as the husband arrived home early, he noticed something unusual. His wife's car was parked in a different spot than usual. Curious, he entered the house quietly, only to hear soft voices coming from the bedroom. He stood frozen for a moment, his heart racing as he realized who was in the room with her. There, in their bed, his wife was with a man he had never seen before, a figure from her past who had crept back into her life. Shock and betrayal flooded him as he listened to their conversation. It became clear she had been seeing him behind his back, each word cutting through the silence like a dagger. The man noticed the door slowly creaking open and quickly turned to face the husband. The wife, now startled, jumped out of bed, but it was too late. The husband stood at the doorway, his face pale with disbelief. The secret was out, and the truth hung heavy in the air between them. She apologized, tears welling up in her eyes, but the damage had already been done. The trust that once held their marriage together was shattered, leaving nothing but empty promises and a haunting realization that nothing would ever be the same again. The husband stood motionless in the doorway, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His mind raced, but his body felt paralyzed, as if time had frozen. His wife, still in disbelief, stood there, her eyes pleading, but her words were lost in the silence that enveloped the room. The man beside her, an ex-boyfriend she hadn't mentioned in years, was now scrambling to gather his things, trying to avoid confrontation, but it was clear that the damage was irreparable. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she finally whispered, her voice shaky. "I never wanted to hurt you." Her husband's heart ached, the familiar pain of betrayal tearing at him. He had trusted her, believed in their marriage, and now it felt as though everything he had built was crumbling in front of him. "You didn't mean to hurt me," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper, heavy with disbelief. "You've been hiding this from me for months, sneaking around behind my back. And now you say you didn't mean to hurt me." The ex-boyfriend, unable to meet the husband's eyes, awkwardly slung his jacket over his shoulder and hurried out of the room. He knew there was nothing left for him here. As he slipped out the door, the wife fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "I don't know what happened," she cried. I felt lost, and he was there when I needed someone. I didn't think I would go this far. I never meant to hurt you." But the husband was beyond words now. He could see the brokenness in her eyes, the guilt that weighed on her. But what he felt was a mixture of anger, confusion, and deep sadness. His entire world had been built on the love and trust they had shared, and now it seemed like everything had been a lie. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, his voice calm, though it trembled with the pain he couldn't hide. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. You've destroyed something I thought was unbreakable. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had." The wife clung to him, her sobs echoing through the room, but the husband stepped away. The distance between them was no longer just physical. It had become emotional, an unbridgeable gap that even her tears couldn't heal. "I need space," he said quietly, turning away from her. "I need to think. I can't be here right now." Without another word, he walked out of the bedroom, leaving her kneeling on the floor, broken and regretful. In the stillness of the room, the weight of her actions settled around her like an unbearable storm, knowing deep down that this was just the beginning of a painful journey, one that might not have a happy ending. Days passed, and the silence between them grew unbearable. The husband stayed at a friend's house, retreating from the confrontation, though the images of what he had seen kept haunting him. His thoughts were a constant whirlwind of hurt, betrayal, and unanswered questions. He needed space to clear his mind, but he couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something had changed, perhaps forever. Meanwhile, his wife tried everything she could to reach him. She sent texts, called, and left desperate voicemails. She apologized over and over again, but nothing seemed to break through. The weight of her guilt crushed her, and she couldn't help but replay the moment when she'd been caught, when everything had unraveled. She tried to justify her actions to herself. She told herself it was a moment of weakness, that she hadn't planned for it to happen, but deep down, she knew it wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal, one that cut deeper than she ever imagined. Her ex, the one she had been seeing behind her husband's back, had left her as quickly as he had entered her life. He didn't want to be the villain in someone else's marriage, so he vanished without a trace, leaving her with nothing but regret and a broken relationship. The husband, on the other hand, found himself drowning in uncertainty. He couldn't make sense of the pain he felt. Part of him still wanted to forgive her, still wanted to believe that the love they had was enough to overcome the damage. But another part of him felt something had shifted inside him. Like the foundation of their marriage had been cracked beyond repair after a week of painful silence, he returned home, but the house felt empty, as though it no longer belonged to them. His wife was waiting for him in the living room, her eyes swollen from days of crying, but when she saw him, her face lit up with hope. She stood up, trembling as she spoke. "I understand if you can't forgive me," she said, her voice hoarse. "But please, I need you to know how deeply sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you like this. I don't expect things to go back to normal overnight, but can we at least try to figure out what's next?" The husband looked at her, his emotions torn. He still loved her. That much was clear, but his heart was heavy with the scars of betrayal. He took a deep breath, his voice steady but laced with panic. "Don't know if I can move past this," he admitted. "I keep asking myself if what we had was real. I don't know how we get back from here, or if we even can." Her face fell, but she stepped forward, reaching for his hand. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right," she pleaded. "I know I've broken your trust, but I love you, and I want to fight for us." The husband hesitated, staring down at her hand in his. He wanted to believe her, but the wound was still fresh. The thought of rebuilding their marriage seemed impossible, yet he couldn't bear the idea of losing her either. "I need time," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to think about what I want. I don't know where we go from here, but I need to find some clarity before I make any decisions." She nodded, tears falling freely. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, hoping that we can figure this out." As he turned to walk away, he felt the weight of the decision that lay ahead. There was no going back to what had been, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way to rebuild. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. The journey ahead would be long and painful, but whether it led to healing or an eventual end, only time would tell. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. The husband spent his time in silence, grappling with the chaos of emotions swirling within him. He began to question everything: the trust they had built, the vows they had exchanged, the life they had shared. He tried to throw himself into work, but even his daily routines felt hollow. The weight of the betrayal was always lurking, a constant reminder that the world he knew had been shattered. His wife, on the other hand, was determined to make amends. She kept a respectful distance, giving him the space he had asked for, but she was also relentless in her attempts to prove her sincerity. She left handwritten notes for him, small gestures of love and regret, hoping to show him that she was truly sorry. She went to therapy, both alone and with a counselor, trying to understand why she had strayed and what led her to make such a damaging choice. The tension between them grew as the weeks passed. They spoke little, each conversation feeling awkward, filled with the unspoken weight of their fractured relationship. She still wore the ring he had given her, though it now felt like a symbol of something broken rather than a promise of eternal love. And yet, every night when he lay awake in their bed, her presence beside him reminded him of the love that still lingered beneath the surface, love that had been marred by betrayal, but still stubbornly refused to fade away. One evening, after weeks of barely speaking beyond the essentials, the husband returned home later than usual. His wife was sitting at the kitchen table, the soft glow of the overhead lights casting shadows on her face. She had made dinner, a quiet attempt to create a sense of normalcy, but there was a tension in the air that neither could ignore. I thought we could talk, she said, her voice soft and tentative. About us. About where we go from here. He sat down across from her, his gaze fixed on her face, but it was clear he was still torn. I've been thinking a lot, he said, his voice low and distant. I've been trying to figure out if I can forgive you, if I can ever look at you the same way again. She nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. I know I've hurt you in a way I can never undo, but I need you to know that I'm here. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. I want to prove that I'm worth fighting for. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, deep in thought. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of their history. The love they once shared was still there, but it was buried beneath a mountain of doubt and pain. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to believe you. I want to believe that we can find our way back to each other. But it feels like there's a part of me that's gone, a part of me that's broken beyond repair. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his. I know I've broken something, and I know it will take time to heal. But I'm not giving up. Not on you, not on us. If you're willing, I want us to try. I want to show you every day that I'm committed to making things right. The words hung in the air like a fragile promise. For the first time in weeks, the husband felt a flicker of hope, but it was still uncertain, like a fragile thread holding them together, waiting for the first gust of wind to snap it. I don't know what that looks like, he admitted. I don't know if I can just forgive and forget, but I do know this. I don't want to live in this pain forever. I want to believe in us again. She squeezed his hand, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Then let's take it one step at a time. No pressure, no rush. Just one step at a time. They sat in silence, the first real moment of connection they had shared in weeks. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. But the road ahead would not be easy. Trust would need to be rebuilt, and wounds would need to heal. Their marriage would never be the same, but perhaps, in time, it could become something different, something stronger, more honest, and ultimately, more resilient. For now, they both clung to that fragile hope, knowing that the journey was only beginning, but willing to take that first step together. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the couple slowly began to navigate the delicate path of reconciliation. The husband, though still haunted by the betrayal, made an effort to open up, to let down his guard little by little. The walls he had built around his heart began to crack, though the process was slow and fraught with uncertainty. The wife continued to do everything in her power to rebuild trust. She shared every detail of her day with him, openly, without hesitation. She changed her routines, stayed connected to him throughout the day, and invited him into her world in ways she hadn't before. She went to therapy with him, their counselor helping them navigate the emotional minefield they had found themselves in. It was clear the pain of the betrayal still lingered, but there were also moments of connection, moments when they could remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. One afternoon, they took a walk together, something they hadn't done in months, perhaps even longer. The sky was overcast, the air cool and crisp, and the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet seemed to echo their quiet steps. For the first time in a long while, they walked side by side, neither of them saying much, but both sensing a shift, an acknowledgement that they were taking this journey together, even if it was still unclear where it would lead. "Do you ever wonder if things will ever feel normal again?" the husband asked, his voice almost hesitant, as if he feared the answer. The wife sighed, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. "I don't know. I think about that a lot. I wonder if we'll ever get back to the place we were, or if we'll have to redefine what normal is for us." He nodded, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. "It's like we're both living in this new reality, but we don't know how to make sense of it yet. I don't know if I can ever stop seeing you the way I saw you before, but I also don't want to lose you." She stopped walking for a moment, turning to face him, Her expression was one of vulnerability, a softness that reflected the pain and hope she felt all at once. "I know," she whispered. "I know that I can't erase what I've done, but I want to be better. I want to show you that I'm not the person who betrayed your trust. I'm not her anymore." He looked into her eyes, searching for something, anything, that might reassure him. The man he had once been, so full of trust and belief in their love, was still inside him, buried beneath layers of hurt. But could that version of himself ever be revived? Could he find a way back to her? Back to them? "I don't want to live in the past," he said slowly, his voice barely above a murmur. "But I can't help but feel like the past is always going to be a shadow over us." She reached out, gently cupping his face in her hands, the warmth of her touch grounding him. "We can't change the past, but we can work to make a future," she said. "A future that's built on honesty, on effort, on love. It will take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, a soft reminder of the world around them. And then, for the first time in a long while, the husband stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, as if trying to anchor himself to the present, to the possibility of healing. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But I don't want to give up on us. I don't want to give up either," she replied softly, her arms tightening around him. "I love you, and I'll keep fighting for us, no matter how long it takes." As they stood there, the weight of everything they had been through hung in the air, but there was also something new, something fragile, yet full of potential. They had a long road ahead, filled with difficult conversations, tears, and moments of doubt. But in that quiet moment, in each other's arms, they found a sliver of hope. Perhaps their relationship would never be the same, but it could still be something. It could still be built, not on perfection, but on resilience, effort, and love that, though scarred, was still there, waiting to grow once more.